Thank you very much, my young friends.
A wide array of subjects, speakers from different fields, luminaries in their own areas of work. And I was wondering whether I will be a misfit in this entire organized program. But truly a delight to be here once again amongst all of you. I have very fond memories of my last interaction. And some of the questions were both very probing and also very educative, because I thought I learned a lot. And for me, if you were to ask me one single reason for being able to do at least some of the things that I hope I've been able to achieve in the last 22 months as a minister, I think the biggest contribution has been the interactions with people from different sections of society, different stakeholders in the work that I do, because every single one of the interactions has enriched me, has given me some more food for thought, and I'm hoping to go back today, after meeting all of you, far more inspired to do more work and to work with all of you to achieve better results. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It's very clear that India is what it is because of the power of the youth of India. In fact, I was recalling something I'd read about the youth that Swami Vivekananda had articulated over 100 years ago. And he had said it's the youth of India, particularly what they learn and what they do in their growing up years, who are going to determine not only the future of the country, but their own family future, but their own personal future. And it's these growing up years, the early years of our life, that determine how good or bad a citizen each one of us is going to be as we go into the real world. And in that sense, the very fact that all of you are willing to say we can do something, we can achieve significant results, we can make a difference, is a very powerful statement. The fact that each one of you wants to contribute to the future of India is a very encouraging statement. The fact that each one of you is an optimist, moving away from the cynicism and the pessimism and the complete lack of confidence that we sometimes find, particularly in the older generation. And for that matter, if one was to see too much of television these days, even my good friend Arnab, did he come in earlier in the day? He could not. I think he has a family situation which may have not been conducive to him traveling to Delhi, so you must excuse him. And he's a very, very, very dear friend and articulate journalist. But if you watch too much of television, especially 24-hour television, I think it could leave each one of us completely demoralized and willing to give up on our country. But I personally believe there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of goodness all across the country. It's only for us to seek it out. Probably it's sometimes only to look at the same thing in a different light. I mean, if at all one was to look at anything that's happening in the country, I'm sure there'll be two ways of looking at the same thing. One could be a crisis or a problem, the other could be an opportunity. And the work that we have tried to do in the last 22 months is to see what are the opportunities that are there in the ecosystem around us, and how those opportunities could be converted into action, into an actionable agenda, and reach out to the people of India, make a difference to their lives, to their future. And in that sense, if the various programs that the government of India has initiated in the last 22 months were to be seen in isolation, they may not reflect really the true picture. They may give a feeling of, okay, so what if there's going to be a clean India? How does it impact my life? So what if Prime Minister is talking of digital India? I'm already connected on the net, so it really will not make any difference to my life. So what if Prime Minister or the government is talking about strengthening the Make in India initiative, making it easier to do business? I'm quite comfortable in my job, it doesn't impact me. But when you see all of these various programs, be it the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program, be it the Skill India program, be it the Jan Dhan Yojana, so that we can bring financial inclusion to the lesser privileged sections of society, be it the Mudra Yojana, so that self-entrepreneurship can be encouraged with low-cost funding on easier terms and easy availability, be it the Startup India initiative, be it Mission Innovation. When you see all of these various programs as beads in one string, as textile which goes into making of one carpet, then you'll truly understand that how all of these programs integrate and brought together on one platform, or becoming strings of one violin or the notes of one piano, when all of them work in consortium with each other, that's when the true music of development, that's when the true beauty of engagement, that's where the benefits of all of these programs will integrate into a brighter tomorrow for the youth of India, for each one of you. Our effort is that this big population, which at one point of time was being considered a curse, should be looked at as a great demographic dividend that India has. And it's up to you and me together to see whether we get dividends out of this demographic profile of the country, or it becomes a liability on the balance sheet. And I think if we all work together, ideate together, implement those ideas together, work as a team, the team that we have often articulated on different occasions, that's the only way we can really take the fruits of development to the last man in the bottom of the pyramid. Because truly India cannot be considered a developed nation. We cannot really become an economic superpower unless the person at the bottom of the pyramid, the poorest of the poor, gets equal opportunity, gets an opportunity to study, gets an opportunity to be skilled, has an opportunity for a job or to become an entrepreneur, gets the kind of opportunities that we in this room have today. But believe me, when I go into the interiors of the country, when I'm traveling the length and breadth of maybe Odisha or Uttar Pradesh or West Bengal or Jharkhand, I don't see that over there. And to my mind, the fact that even today there are power reaches any one of these villages, and I have 369 young boys and girls, maybe your age, maybe even younger than many of you I see before me. They are fresh engineering graduates, maybe 2-3 years experience. We've hired them mostly from those areas where electricity is not there. They are called Gramin Vidyutikaran Abhyantas. That's rural electrification soldiers. These young 369 boys and girls, and I'm interacting with them periodically, are truly supercharged in their work. The fact that against a target of 2,800 villages being electrified in the current year, these young boys and girls like you have been able to electrify or take electricity to about 7,008 villages so far. Is a testimony to the strength of young India. It's a testimony to their ability to perform in very adverse circumstances. And believe me, these are those villages which have taken 69 years after independence. So you can imagine the difficult terrain in which they are. They may be on the top of a mountain. They could be in some deep, dense forest, many of them infested with Maoist activities. Some of these villages are truly inaccessible. There's no road. I saw some pictures of these boys going with harness and climbing up a mountain to take the equipment to those villages. They are so inaccessible. There are about 800 odd villages in Arunachal Pradesh. And I'm sure all of you understand the significance of Arunachal Pradesh, the geopolitical conditions that exist in that state, the border tension that is there with our neighboring country with respect to Arunachal Pradesh. There are over 800 villages where we can't take electricity through the grid. There is no grid. We've started working on creating a grid in Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, spending about $1.5 billion US to take electricity to those remote areas. But that would still take a long time. We therefore decided, let's take them, give them the benefit of electricity through an off-grid solution. And then when my people came to me, they said, usually we give a solar panel with a battery, which would give light for about 3 LED bulbs in the night, 25 watts. I said, but 25 watts is not something which can transform those people's lives. We need to be more concerned that in the heat they also get. It's now time that they're also connected with a mobile charger. Some of them have to go 4 hours just to charge a mobile. I said it's at least necessary that we give them maybe a small television so that they can be connected to the rest of the world and see what's happening in the rest of the world. So I don't think today having a small television, light, fan, mobile charger, possibly going forward a small fridge, refrigerator, is no more a luxury. I would think it's almost a necessity today. Those are the people, those are the families, those are the youngsters whom we have to be most concerned about. It's their life that matters in India more than any other program. It's the ability to give them the benefit of these equipments that are going to make a difference to their life. And my dear young friends, this cannot be done either by the central government or by any government or by any government officials alone. This can only be done when you and we work as one. It can only be done when I have these 400-500 youngsters coming up with ideas. When I have each one of you willing to spare some time, participate in some of these programs. And the participation can be at different levels. I have a young boy working with me. He used to work with McKinsey. He quit that job since his wife had a good job in a company and was making reasonable money. Who's working now on a government salary. I suspect his salary would be 40 or 50,000 rupees. But he's not working for salary. He's working with a passion. He quit his job in McKinsey, worked with me when I was in opposition also, then came into government with me. In opposition, he worked pro bono. Now he gets some 40, 50,000 rupees. His working hours are not less than mine, which would be about 17, 18 hours. He's the principal architect of the UDAY program, the Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, which to my mind is the most comprehensive reform ever undertaken in the power sector. But it could not have been done by all of us old foggies. It was done by this youth power who sat, who studied the whole problem in detail, interacted with stakeholders across the country, and thousands of hours of work, and possibly more than 1,000 interactions is what led to the creation of UDAY. And in that sense, every one of my interactions, as I said earlier, are the cause of whatever little work we have been able to do, particularly in rural electrification, in energy efficiency, in converting India from a power deficit state, from a coal deficit state, to a coal surplus state and a power surplus state today. The entire nation today has surplus power. I have appealed to states, as much power as you want, we can help you get. As much coal as you want, we can help you get. And this only shows that where there is a will, everything is possible. And you know where the transformation of Coal India happened from? Each of the 7 subsidiaries hired 500 youngsters a few months ago, about a year and a half ago. We got each one of them to hire 500 youngsters. They are the principal architects of preparing the 1 billion ton roadmap for Coal India Limited, doubling production in 5 years. A company which used to be a laggard, used to produce 1 or 2% growth every year, is currently at nearly 8.5%, 9% growth, and will continue to grow at this rate. So I nation building. Be it a part of the Skill India program, be it a part of the Digital India program, be it a part of the Affordable Housing program, be a part of the Rural program where we want to take urban amenities to rural India, something that the late Honorable President of India, Abdul Kalamji, always dreamed of and he articulated in his book, Vision 2020. I think all of these things are doable. But they're doable with the strength and support we derive from your participation. So I would like to make this earnest appeal through the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, and Young Indians to see that if we can get your power coming into our programs, I have no doubt in my mind. It may take us 5 years, it may take us 10 years, but India is poised for decadal double-digit growth in the years to come. India is poised to become truly an economic superpower in the world. But a superpower different from the ones we have today may not be in terms of huge nuclear missiles, may not be in terms of per capita incomes of $70,000 or $80,000, but a superpower in the sense we will have 1 billion plus happy people. We want a happy society. And I think all of you have the capacity to transform India into a happy India. And that happiness cannot be only measured in terms of money. That happiness will be in terms of India's traditional values and culture and heritage. That happiness will certainly be in terms of quality education and healthcare. That happiness will be incomplete without our parents getting a good deal. That happiness will be incomplete unless each one of us can be self-dependent, independent, and not dependent on government doles and government largesse. That happiness can only be when we also have leisure and recreation and tourism as an integral part of each Indian's life. That happiness can only be when we truly believe we are living in a safe, secure, inclusive society where we are confident that even those who may be lesser privileged than us are not deprived of the basic amenities of a good home, a good toilet, electricity, education, healthcare. And I'm sure each one of us believes that our happiness will only get enhanced as we see the happiness of the poor, of the farmers, of the deprived sections of society. And if each one of us, 500 boys and girls in this room, take it upon ourselves that we will lead an initiative that will give happiness to maybe 100 families, maybe 1,000 families, maybe in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever each one of you can sacrifice. To my mind, this program at Taj Palace today, in this beautiful setting, well lit up, bright, can become the nucleus of a transformational initiative that could be led by Young Indians and CII. Let's work together. We can and we will. Thank you.
Years, we get the opportunity to sit here with you and to ask you a few questions ourselves. before we go out to the audience. So I think Raghu and I will probably take the liberty of asking sir a couple of questions. India as a global economic superpower is something we're hearing for the longest time. We probably have taken large steps towards that. We're no longer someone who is not, we do have a seat in the table. How big or small is still subjective. But sir, above all, in the last 3-4 years, the global economy has been giving everyone mixed signals and more not so good signals as compared to good signals. Commodity sector still continues to bleed across the world. Manufacturing suffers. Geopolitical things don't seem to be improving beyond a point. So with all that, and of course we all know how linked the economy is, every country's economy, every nation's economy is so linked to the other. So with all this, how does India see itself taking the steps to achieving that double-digit growth year on year towards a happier, more satisfied, more well-taken care of populace?
To my mind, if we first of all start believing in ourselves, that is the most critical and crucial element to the success of this nation. We have to move out from despondency to optimism, first. Second, we are missing the point of 1 billion plus people. Where in the world are there an aspiring billion hoping to get a better quality of life? So I have, for example, been going around the world trying to bring the latest technology in the power sector so that we can leapfrog. We don't have to go through the learning curve that many other nations had to. We can just leapfrog and get the best to our country. If we were to use that across sectors, I see no reason why double-digit growth should be a 1-year, 2-year phenomena. It could be a phenomena for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. China did that very successfully for 30 odd years. From 84 to 2014, China had a runaway growth for 30 years. And what did they leverage on? They used economies of scale. They used the fact that they had a large population of unemployed people who were aspiring for a better quality of life, so therefore needed jobs. They made sure that they incentivized manufacturing in their country. And at one point, I believe they had gone up even above 25 or 30% as manufacturing share in their GDP. Now, all of these things are possible for India. We don't need to clone China, but we can have our own innovative methods of how do we take this benefit of growth to the people of India. Now, if you see even our per capita income of $1,800 US, there's a big skew in that. So you would have billionaires on the one end, and you have a large section of population who are barely making 2 square meals a day. Their annual income of the family may not be $1,000. In fact, that would in fact be a luxury in the remote areas of Jharkhand and Odisha. Even $1,000. Now with this kind of disparity, if we focus our efforts to give them quality education, skill them, make them employable. I mean, today even cleaning this carpet is a job of a skill. Somebody can use that vacuum cleaner wackily and not really clean the carpet, but maybe move the dust from one point to the other. And another person can do it skillfully so that he quickly has the place set up as soon as you finish your program for the next program. Now, all of these are areas where there's huge opportunity. It's for us to leverage the economies of scale, bring in greater degree of transparency, monitor whatever programs we undertake so that our work is more outcome-oriented. And if together we become monitors of the work that is happening across the country, we can transform or get into that big league very quickly. I know there are challenges in the world economy. So, for example, with commodity prices coming down, exports are challenged right now. But India itself is such a huge market. Wherever I go in the world, I see the energy demand is going to plateau or fall in the next 20 or 30 years. As more energy efficiency comes in, as their own efforts are made to reduce wasteful consumption of electricity, their demand is going to go down. Japan, Australia, the United States. Now at this situation, where will the world want to sell its produce? Countries like India and other countries in this region, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. This is where the market opportunity is. It's for us to leverage. So give you one small example, LEDs. You know I'm passionate and I'm getting LEDs replace all the bulbs in the country. And I don't know if you are aware, just replacing all the electricity bulbs by LED bulbs in the country, we have about 770 million in the country and about 35 million street lights. Just this singular program is going to result in a saving of about 100 billion units of electricity every year. Every year. And who benefits? This is not a saving that the government benefits. It's a saving that the consumer benefits directly. It's in your electricity bills. Because your electricity consumption falls drastically. A 60-watt incandescent old bulb, Baba Adam ke zamane ka, gets replaced with a 9 or 7-watt LED bulb. You can imagine the amount of saving in electricity. I think the kind of audience I'm seeing here, each one of you would have 100 bulbs in your home, maybe more. Some of you I can visualize having 500-700 bulbs in your homes. But imagine those poor people in the rural India who barely have 1 or 2 bulbs in their home. For them, the saving in electricity from a 60-watt bulb to a 9-watt bulb is about 70-80% saving in their electricity bulb. And they barely consume anything more. And India will save $6.5 billion every year in consumers' electricity bills. 40,000 crore rupees annual saving. And the impact on environment, 80 million tons of carbon dioxide reduction. And I know all of you are very concerned about the environment. You're willing to take out morchas and even willing to support the odd-even scheme, I hope. But then, if all of you are going to use one odd number car one day and another even number car the other day, and if you don't have two, you'll probably buy another third, then I think that'll be cheating the system. But that was only on a lighter note. But this one program can save 80 million tons of carbon dioxide. So if India thinks transformational and to scale, and we do it skillfully, you know how much the LED prices have fallen? 80% in the last 18 months. 80% fall. Today you can go out there and buy a bulb for 99 rupees. Something which my own wife 2 years ago had paid 2,000 rupees per bulb. And a normal bulb would otherwise be available for 500-600 rupees. CFLs were 300-400 rupees at that time, which are so harmful with mercury. So I think if each one of you applies your mind, we can get 500 ideas in this room alone, which can have transformational impact if you scale it up. So speed, skill, scale, and decisive visionary leadership is what India needs, and which all of you can provide.
Thank you, sir. Every time we hear you speak, we are electrified. My next question is on global energy security and the race to build assets, especially for a growing economy like India. What do you think our plan should be in the medium to long term in terms of ensuring that we have sufficient energy to meet our growth needs?
You know, this has been a bogey that I would like to dispel today. India has the ability, as we speak today, to generate 150% of the power that we generate today, given the existing assets that we have. So there's so much capacity which is underutilized or inefficiently utilized in India today, even as we speak. So power is something where India today is already surplus. And as we expand our renewable energy program, and I'm sure you're all aware, India has embarked on the world's largest scale-up of clean energy, 175 gig target, which is about 5 times our existing capacity in the next 6 years now. 1 year has already gone by. Now with this kind of scale-up on renewable energy, and whatever may happen in the world, I think the sun and wind and rain and water is something nobody can take away from us. Coal is something we have in India. So India today is poised to become 100% energy secure. And our security on energy is very critical to India's own success in the years to come. We are now working on how to reduce our dependence on oil and gas, because that's an area where we still import nearly $100 billion of oil and gas into the country. Now, what are we doing about that? It's a two-pronged attack. Very recently, we came out with HELP, a new exploration licensing policy, hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy, which is transformational. And we do believe that's going to bring in a lot of investment into India to explore and generate more oil and gas from within the country. Simultaneously, we are working on programs to reduce our consumption. Let me articulate only two programs. One, we are looking at more and more consumption of ethanol. Ethanol comes out of sugarcane and sugarcane waste, bagasse, which can replace petrol or be mixed with petrol, blended with petrol. And Brazil uses up to 30%. When we came in government, India was using barely 1.5%. We are now moving it up to 5% of our petrol will be ethanol. So not only is it clean fuel, but it also gives us energy independence, security, and saves our foreign exchange. So we are hoping to scale it up at the next level to about 10%. Look at the transformational impact it will have on the farmer's income. It'll keep sugar prices under control. It'll give them additional income out of the bagasse that they can convert to ethanol. It'll make petroleum products more within the country than imports, save our foreign exchange. So every program that we are coming up with has a 360-degree thought process behind it. It's a holistic, comprehensive program. And thirdly, I'm articulating a theory, and we have yet not worked on it, but if some of you are interested, I'd invite your participation in helping me achieve this. We have created a small working group under the leadership of Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who's an absolutely phenomenally dynamic minister, comes up with truly big picture and big scale programs. So we've set up a small group where Dharmendra Pradhan, Petroleum Minister, Javadekar, Environment Minister, me as Energy Minister, and Mr. Gadkari as our Senior Cabinet Minister and looking after road transport. We're going to meet in the first week of April. And we are trying to see, can India be 100% on electric vehicles by 2030? India can become the first country in the world of this size which will run 100% on electric vehicles. And you know what we are trying to do in that? We are trying to make this whole program self-financing. We don't need 1 rupee support from the government. We don't need 1 rupee investment from the people of India. We're trying to see if we can monetize the savings that you will have by cheaper electricity charging your cars. I use a hybrid, and I'm delighted. My petrol consumption has fallen by about 60% in my car. Of course, my personal car, the government doesn't spend money on new cars. But we are trying to work out, can we actually give out electric cars for free? And people can pay for that out of the savings you will have on petroleum products. So innovation is possible. It just needs an open mind. You need to think to scale, and you need to be honest.
Piyush, we're going to quickly open up a couple of questions. We're going to ask the audience 3 questions, a total of 3 questions. Please keep your questions as concise and accurate as possible. I'm going to walk all the way there. Excuse me, Mr. Man clicking picture. Hi.
I'm Jainil Shah from Gujarat, Ahmedabad. One, of course, it is very inspiring to hear that government is working with such a vision on clean energy. One thing I wanted to ask was, what are we trying to do as government to...
Funds being stuck with these big power plants and a lot of money being allotted to these plants. So how do we solve this problem, sir?
We can take a couple more questions from here. So
We can. Okay, I'll move to the other side. Could you point out?
Otherwise, I could be blamed for being partial to the right.
Okay, I have one all the way at the back.
Talk, sir. You have invited us to be part in nation building. I would surely write back to you on this, sir. Hope we get an opportunity to work with you. Thank you.
What's your name, ma'am?
I'm Ramya from Mysore, Ramya Bopanna.
Should we go for one more?
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Vivek from Calcutta. And I'm a big BJP fan and I hope BJP comes to Calcutta. But there are rumors in Calcutta that Mamata Banerjee and BJP are tying up for the next elections. So I want to know, is that true and what are your comments on that?
So I take it that the interest is more in the power sector than in the overall economy. So this, you might as well have titled this more on the power sector. But clearly, power is a very important element of any economic progress that India wants to do, desires to do. And unless we take power to every home, it's going to be very difficult to plan the rest of the future of our people. So I'm delighted that all of you have taken so much interest in the power sector. I'll try to quickly run through these various questions. It's very unfortunate that the United States pursued their complaint against India in WTO. And the sad part is that all that India has done is protected its domestic manufacturers. And about 400 megawatt of power producing equipment has been made by Indian manufacturers so far, out of the nearly 6,000 megawatt of solar plants that are in operation. But despite that, the United States tried to push through this fight against India only to prove a point. And I had discussions at every level in the US government. Unfortunately, they made it a prestige issue rather than taking it as an issue which concerns the whole world and climate change. Our own domestic manufacturers, by the way, had won a complaint against the United States manufacturers for dumping their product in India. So there would have been huge anti-dumping duties on American manufacturers. I personally persuaded them, and it was their magnanimity of Indian manufacturers who withdrew their anti-dumping request despite having won the case, because they wanted India to expand and encourage renewable energy and solar energy. But America was not willing to go that extra mile and reciprocate Indian manufacturers' good gesture. Personally, I feel very let down by the Americans, and I feel it also reflects the hollowness of the American commitment towards clean energy. I'm really disappointed about that. And I'm going to say this on international fora, because all that the Indian manufacturers were saying is they make 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 megawatts of equipment every year. They're not yet competitive in terms of technology, in terms of pricing. So we were only giving them some support. When India scales up to 100,000 megawatt, all that these domestic guys can manufacture could be 15,000 or 20,000 in the next 7 years. It would still have given an opportunity for 80,000 megawatt of international bidding. But rather than take that big picture view, they took a very myopic view. And if Indian manufacturing goes back to anti-dumping duties on imports, solar power, which I've been able to bring down the price by about 40% in the last year and a half, will once again become more expensive, uneconomical for the poor of India, and we may have to abort such a beautiful program. So it's completely a reflection on the Western world's total emphasis on profit, total emphasis on private sector incomes and their own growth, with no respect for the sensitivities of the developing world. And I think we need to build up more public opinion against this kind of insensitive behavior of the American government. Having said that, don't worry about it. This government is committed to protecting Indian manufacturers. We will, of course, go and appeal against that order. But we are ingenious enough in India to find an alternate mechanism to protect our manufacturers. So take the message loud and clear. This government will protect every domestic manufacturer and its produce. We'll encourage them further to grow and expand. And my own personal belief is it needs 1.5 years more. We will be more competitive than any other part of the world. And then we'll beat them to it. And lastly, for your information, there are at least 9 US states which also have similar programs where they give protection to domestic manufacturers. 9 programs of various state governments in the US. I'm now examining them and we will file a case against the United States soon. The lady from Gujarat, Toshita, well, social media has been used very effectively by this government. We have MyGov, the site that the Honorable Prime Minister uses. The Railway Minister has done exceedingly well in resolving issues real time. I'm always available and I do try to address issues that come up on my Twitter handle or Facebook. But I'd just like to caution you a little bit on this. Power is a subject which is actually a concurrent list subject, and the states provide power and provide the last mile connectivity. The central government is more like a policy setting organization. And yes, I have the power to, just squeeze their neck a little bit if they behave truantly, or arm twist them. So I can exercise that power if any of you can come up with some complaints or some real stories which can help us see whether they are doing quality work. After all, I give money to the states and I expect them to do a good job when they're reaching electricity to each home and taking power to new villages. But why I need all of you to support me, and please expand your social media engagement with me. Point out what are the deficiencies. And I'm now proposing to come up with several more apps after the success of GARV, G-A-R-V. That's the app which gives you real-time information on what villages are getting electrified. I urge you to download that. It's very exciting. And if you deep dive into that app, you'll find visual pictures of villages which get newly electrified. People there actually do aarti of this GVA, this Gramin Vidyutikaran Abhyanta who goes there. Uski aarti utarti hai. It's almost they feel like God has come and given them electricity. Just imagine the joy on that young child, or even on that old 60, 70-year-old person who's never seen electricity in his village. The first light bulb that goes on, it's like a festival over there. Our Holi is nothing compared to the festival when light reaches those villages. And I'll put out some more videos for you all to see in the next few days. I'm glad you raised that, Toshita. Let me put out, I have a lot of those images. I've probably not been as active as I should. But I'll put out some more. It's heart-rending. You feel so happy to see their joy. Some of you go to the villages. I'll organize your trip. Go and see a village which is freshly getting electrified. It's more enjoyable, it's more fun than probably Amir Khan's Three Idiot. Both of which have a big message to give after all. He gave us a deep message in that movie, which relates to the youth. But when you see the power reaching those villages and the empowerment they feel with that, it's a delight. But I'll also increase my social media engagement. But if any of you has any problem that comes to you, it could be in my sectors, it could be across the government, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. Reach out to the Prime Minister in mygov.in. Reach out to me. My email ID is Piyush Goyal, G-O-Y-A-L, so that you don't spell it wrong, bjp@gmail.com. Of course, I'll be honest with you, I have no private email ID. People ask me, what's your private email ID? I said 22 months ago, I lost my privacy. So I have no private email ID, I have no private number. My mobile numbers are more well known than probably 500 of you put together. Probably if you Google on internet, you can find my mobile number. But truly, there's no private life. You can reach out to me anytime, 24/7, and I assure you, we'll act on it. But please engage with us. I think the time is ringing away. Well, the second term is for you to decide. The Prime Minister said recently that you all are the monitors of our work. And we'll come back to you in 2019. And that'll be the time I'd like to know how many in this room are satisfied with the work we do, and how many of you will come into my team to work for the 2019 campaign. Just like I would expect you to come in also. Chetan talked about the stranded projects. We are working with clinical precision to sort out the DISCOM's problem through Uday. And if any of you are interested, I would urge you to type Uday, U-D-A-Y presentation, or go to my website. There's a 72-slide presentation which will show you why I said Uday is probably the most comprehensive reform ever undertaken in the power sector. And I think the implementation of Uday, which I personally monitor, will help us increase the power demand and therefore sort out the problem of those stranded power projects, a lot of which have already started coming on stream due to greater availability of gas and coal that we are providing through production and imports. Yogesh talked about wind energy. You know, it's election time and I can't talk much about Tamil Nadu because the model code of conduct is there. But if you come from Tamil Nadu, one sentence will help you understand the problem. Why this problem is only there in Tamil Nadu? It's a state within the state. It's a part of the country where I can't even reach out to the chief minister. I have made several attempts to talk to their leaders without success. So I have access to 28 states in this country. But on the 29th state, even if I call up and want to talk, I talk to the power minister. He hears me and he says, okay, I'll talk to Amma and get back to you. In parliament, they can't open their mouth, any of the members of that party, unless they have a script which has been sanitized or vetted in Chennai, and they read out from that. It's actually the state where in my 18 or 22 months, I've only been able to reach out to the CM once using a lot of back channels where I got a call back and she promised me that she'll send her team. The team came. They discussed with me the power sector reforms that we were trying to do, but till today has not signed up. Whereas all other states, Uttar Pradesh writes me a letter when they agree with all our terms and say, Akhilesh Yadav writes to me a message and says, I'm happy to join Uday because I believe it's in the interest of the people of Uttar Pradesh. I lose an election in Bihar, and within 15 days, the chief minister tells me we want to sign up on Uday. It's a win-win for everybody. And our most severe opponents, political opponents, are also agreeing on that. So you'll appreciate that we have tried to be most fair without distinguishing whatever be the political color or ideology of a state government. But Tamil Nadu is something where till there is a government change, I don't know if I can make any significant impact. But after the elections, I'll certainly take this question of yours to the government and try to find a solution to that. Ramya, please write to us and then we can work out how CII or somebody could be the catalyst, or Young Indians could be the catalyst for greater engagement with your group and the government of India. In fact, we are looking for people even in the Prime Minister's office, by the way. We are looking for people in the digital engagement team. We are looking for people in different ministries, young guys and girls like you, who can help us with new ideas and fresh initiatives to transform India. Vivek, I wish your words would come true. We are already into election mode, and I promise you will give a good fight to her. Well, our thrust on renewable energy is non-negotiable. Whether we win a case in WTO or lose a case, I promise you 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, 100 gigs of which will be solar, and irrespective, I remember when, just a small political aside if you don't mind before I go, I was campaigning in Varanasi the last 7 days before the last phase of the election. If you recall 2014, the last day of election was 10th or 12th of May. 12th of May 2014. And I think 4th or 5th May I'd been sent to Varanasi. I was there that last week. And around 8th of May, Prime Minister wanted to do a rally there, right? The local administration refused to allow him to do a rally. Candidate in his own constituency not allowed to do a rally. And we kept fighting. We talked to the commissioner. We talked to the political leadership of the state. They refused to allow it. So we said, fine, we can't do anything about it. But Prime Minister nevertheless wanted to come and engage with his constituency. So he flew into Varanasi, landed at the Banaras Hindu University helipad, and from there he just drove up to his party office, the BJP party office. That drive took him about 8 or 9 hours because the whole city came on the streets to see the then candidate, today Prime Minister. And that 8-hour drive won him an election with, I think, 5 lakh votes or something. That's the only day he came to Varanasi. He was not able to do a single campaign constituency. So any adversity can be converted into an opportunity. And in fact, speaking in a public meeting with maybe 50,000 people would have been less effective than driving from amongst their midst over 7 or 8 or 10 kilometers over 10 hours or 8 hours. And I remember that night, I talked to Piyush Pandey, who was running our ad campaign. About 7 o'clock, Prime Minister was still in the convoy, the cavalcade driving the streets. I was seeing it on television in front of my eyes in the hotel room. And I was seething with anger for not having been given the permission for the election rally. So I called up Piyush Pandey. I said, look, these visuals are all there on television. See that and make an ad, which I want to show all over India, even though elections are over in most of India. But I said, write in that ad, that whatever be the adverse circumstances, whatever be the, in Hindi I told him, चाहे कोई बाधाएं आ जाए, कोई आंधी आए, तूफान आए, कुछ भी हो जाए, हम निरंतर विकास के पथ पे चलते रहेंगे. We'll continue our fight against corruption. We'll continue to bring development to this country. We'll continue in our mission and succeed for India, irrespective of any adversities. And I remember with what anger I had told Piyush Pandey, make this out in the night. Today is the 8th. 9th evening, 5 o'clock, I want to start running it till 10th evening, 6 o'clock. Because that's the last 24 hours. 10th evening, 6 o'clock, television advertisements had to stop. And I said, this is one clipping. I don't want to run only in the areas which are going to poll on the 12th. I want to give this message to the entire country. And believe you me, Piyush worked the whole night. There were several iterations. I also sobered down over the night. By the morning, I removed all these aggressive tone and that made it softer. We talked about progress. We talked about reaching good governance to the people. 5 o'clock, I think CNN IBN is the first channel which broke that ad. And last 24 hours, if you get that clipping, I have it with me. I can WhatsApp it to you. You can share it with everybody. It's a brilliant 40-second clipping which we showed across the country. And that, in a way, encompasses our commitment to the people of India, irrespective of whether GST is passed in Rajya Sabha or no, irrespective of any opposition, from any quarter to any of our development programs. I promise you, we stand committed to everything we told you before the elections. We stand committed to a powerful India, an energized India, with redoubling our efforts on every adversity, so that we can all be proud citizens of this country, a safe, secure country of people who are passionate about their nation, who are passionate about their nationalism. Let's go for it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm going to have to request Jacob Joy to kindly step up on stage.
Photograph.